Yeah, so on page 4 of the minutes, there's a discussion about some cash flow issues that are upcoming as a result of delays from two separate, fairly substantial pots of money. And there's a comment in there, McNally stated he would reach out to county administration to discuss options. And I wanted to have an understanding, this is the February minutes, if either Commissioner Morris or our administrator can speak to what the issue is and what our role there would be.
Thank you, Mr. Bott, and I did meet with Ms. McNally and Lindsay Dude from the Pavilions to talk about what they are experiencing, and it is a cash flow problem for them. They are down, what did they say, about 2 months? When we met with them, they're about 2 months of cash balance, and the crux of the issue is they are waiting on payments from the state and the federal government that will cover COVID-related incidental costs that were incurred by the pavilions, and the inability to completely house the numbers needed to make their budget work, essentially. They are waiting for those dollars. We have reached out to Congressman Bergman's office, Senator Peters' office, and asked them for assistance in getting those funding barrels kicked loose so we can have those funds go to the pavilions. And what I understand from Lindsay's latest email to Mr. Bott and I is that there is a date identified that they're at least going to talk about it. Dean, did I characterize that correctly?
That is correct.
And is there a contingency plan? What happens if those dollars, start getting far enough behind and there's a cash flow and food service bills aren't getting paid, for example?
They could ask the county for a loan, and the county could provide a low-interest, no-interest loan to the pavilions to get them through the gap.
And those conversations, the logistics are underway, or we have confidence that you would be able to step in as needed?
Yes, we didn't commit to anything. Mr. Bott and I have talked since that discussion with Mr. McNally and Mr. Dude, and that would be something this board would have to be well involved in before we make any commitment to the pavilions.
On that note, we did allocate ARPA funding towards equipment at the pavilions. Is that something maybe we could forward that in advance and then they could play their shell game to pay for the equipment once they get their money in?
Mr. Bott had conceived of that as well, and that is something that we are currently working on. I sent Mr. Dude an email yesterday asking can they be the first one to test out our new agreement so we can get that payment made.
Okay.
Can you give us a sense of the scale on a monthly basis of the shortfall that the Pavilions is experiencing as a result of these delays?
Well, a couple of comments. The amount of funds that they're waiting on are substantial. One is a federal tax credit because of the fact that they retained their employees during the pandemic. That's about a $6 million receivable. Other medical care facilities have already received that payment from the federal government. So we're hoping that's received relatively soon. The Medicare, Medicaid cost settlement money is somewhere a little bit over $3 million. And as Administrator Alger mentioned, not having those funds seriously impacts their cash flow. I believe our ARPA grant to them was $265,000. They have actually completed that project, and we are very close to having an agreement that we can work with. We have to have that agreement executed before we can turn the funds over. But their restricted cash balances are very low. They did cover payroll through the end of March, and I believe at some point in time this month, Mr. Dude, who is their CFO, said that they would be basically using unrestricted reserves or restricted reserves to cover payroll and expenses. So the timing here is getting critical. I mean, they still have cash, but they don't have a lot of cash to work with, and we're hoping these payments are received. But unfortunately, we can't move the IRS. We tried because they have to release that payment before the U.S. Treasury will make the payment, and then working with the state on higher reimbursement rates for the services they provide is also, it's hard to move the state government and where those funds come from. So, timing is really starting to become an issue.
And it's not as if the funding is not coming. They reported to us that the system we use, either going through the Michigan County Medical Care Facilities Association or through their local representatives, other medical care facilities did receive the funding once that process was undertaken. So we are hopeful that they should be getting that soon.
You mentioned that other federal or other facilities had received the federal funding, but we have not. What's the reasoning behind that?
We don't have an answer to that. You're working with the Internal Revenue Service. They're reviewing 941 payroll tax returns that were filed. Those returns, they're reported under Grand Traverse County's federal ID. All of those requests for refunds were filed well over a year ago. And why some medical care facilities have received those federal tax credits or refunds and we have not, I can't answer that. There's no logic behind this at this point. We're just hoping and praying that those funds are received soon.
Mr. Bott, I noticed recently, I think 6-month CDs are up to like 5%. County cash reserves are in interest-bearing accounts. What kind of yields are we seeing with county cash reserves right now?
That question could be best answered by our treasurer, but I would assume that we generally don't purchase or put a lot of our money in CDs,
Right.
but most of our money would be invested in the class account.
Right.
Some funds would be, I would say that we're earning 4 to 5%
Okay.
on those funds, and we do have very strong cash reserves at this point.
So if you were to, in a case where you might recommend the county extend funding to the pavilions for their short-term needs, would you also recommend we recover the interest that we would have earned had we kept it in that interest-bearing account?
I believe that's something that the county board would want to consider, but in the past, what we've done, usually when we've worked with related parties, whether it be our Board of Public Works, we generally look at a lower rate of interest too, just because of the relationship. I'm not sure I would make a recommendation
Okay.
without knowing
So
how
giving your
much money.
brother-in-law loan?
Well, without knowing how much money and what the term of that loan or that advance, it probably wouldn't be as formal as a loan, but it would definitely be accounted for as an advance that would require some payment of interest because of the point that you're making.
Okay.
And that would come to this board for approval, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions.